Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Captain's Log, followed by the Captain's Cabin tonight. And I want to welcome you all back because I'm finally back. I took a little hiatus for a couple of weeks. I think it was 2 weeks and not 3. It's been a long couple of weeks. So, as a dad, I've had my kids here for the last week and a half because we had spring break. Half of it's over as of yesterday. And so my kids were here last week and then half of spring break. So they went back to their moms today, last night, actually. So that's what I've been doing with my time mostly and other things. And we're going to talk about some of that tonight because I want to look at this idea of some stories start in libraries. And some begin in ruins buried beneath the desert sands. And some begin when a captain returns to the bridge and opens an old map that hasn't been touched in a very long time. And there's an old Egyptian legend that says the universe itself began with 10 breaths from a god. And according to the ancient priests, one of those breaths has never been spoken. Now here's the captain's log, returning to the bridge. Now, it's been quiet on the bridge these past couple of weeks. No new coordinates entered into the charts, no transmissions sent across the stars, just the low hum of the engines somewhere beneath the low deck while the captain stepped away from the map table for a while. And sometimes that happens on long voyages. We step away from the maps. And even explorers need to step away from the compass now and then and step out onto the deck and remember what the stars looked like before the journey ever began. Now, don't worry. The ship didn't sink. The engines didn't fail. Nobody mutinied. Life simply did what life sometimes does. It stirred the seas a little rougher than expected, and every once in a while, the captain has to step away from the wheel, not in defeat, but in recalibration. Some of those things we've talked about for months and months. So it's a moment to breathe, a moment to let ideas ruminate, and a moment to allow new voyages to begin forming quietly beneath the surface. Because the truth is this, the ship is still here. And the engines are still warm. The horizon is still waiting. And while the bridge has been quiet, something interesting has been happening below decks. And ideas have been waking up again. Old charts have been pulled back out of dusty drawers. Stories that have been waiting patiently in the back rooms of the imagination have started knocking again, clearing their throats like old companions who are ready to get back on the road. And so one of those stories is something I've been thinking about for a very long time and something I introduced to you in concept a couple, 3 years ago on the Intrepid radio program. It's a mythic adventure I call The 10 Breaths of Ra. I'm going to talk about that because this is something now that during this time off I've had the opportunity to dig into a little deeper, along and amongst other things I'm still working on. So let's talk about the myth first. According to some of the oldest Egyptian traditions, when the sun god Ra first rose above the horizon of the newborn world, he did not simply create the universe with a word. He breathed it into existence 10 times. And 10 sacred breaths rolling outward through the cosmos like waves across an endless sea. And so with the first breath, the first one, light burst open on the darkness, and time itself began to move. With the second breath, the sky lifted upward and the stars scattered across the heavens. Then the third breath gave shape to the earth itself, mountains rising like bones of the world beneath the sand. The fourth breath stirred the waters. The fifth breath awakened the wandering winds of the desert. And by the sixth, seventh, and eighth breaths, life began to move beneath the rising sun. But the old temple traditions whisper something else. They say the ninth breath of Ra was hidden. It was buried deep in the fabric of creation itself, waiting for the moment when humanity would begin asking the oldest questions again. Who are we? Where did we come from? Why does the universe sometimes seem to remember us? And then the 10th breath, the stories say that one has never been spoken at all. The 10th breath. And it waits somewhere beyond the horizon of time. So this is where that story begins. Now imagine discovering that those ancient whispers weren't simply myth. Imagine discovering that they might actually be clues. And that's where the story begins. In the modern world, the mystery begins with Dr. Eileen Byrne. She's brilliant, determined, and in the story's world, she becomes the first woman to graduate from Oxford with a doctorate in archaeology and anthropology. But success doesn't earn her easy acceptance. The academic world she steps into still believes such work belongs to men. So every expedition, every excavation, every discovery becomes another battle to prove that she belongs here. Now, Professor Pine, the respected archaeologist leading the Egyptian expedition, recognized something in her. Intelligence, courage, the willingness to follow a mystery wherever it might lead. But one morning in the desert, Dr. Byrne wakes to something deeply wrong. Silence. No workers stirring in the camp, no voices, no clinking tools greeting the sunrise. She steps outside her tent and finds the excavation site empty, until she climbs a small ridge overlooking the camp, and there she sees them. Every worker lying face down in the sand, held there at gunpoint by armed men. Standing among them is a stranger known only as Satesh. And nearby lies the body of Professor Pine. Moments later, the men gather ancient relics and research notes and climb into a waiting motor car, a dusty Dort touring car, waiting. It's a 1922 Dort touring car, waiting like some mechanical beast at the edge of the desert. The engine roars, the car turns toward the rising sun and disappears across the sand, taking with it whatever secret Professor Pine died trying to uncover. Now, at this point, enter a young man named Daniel Badcock. He's Romani, British Romani. And the story doesn't stop with what happened earlier here, because far away in the green hills of Wales, another thread of the mystery begins to move. At a 1,000-year-old manor estate belonging to a man named Daniel Badcock, Daniel's grandparents were Romani wagon travelers, horse-drawn gypsies who wandered the British countryside carrying old traditions and older stories. But his father stepped into the new mechanical age of aviation. He built aeroplanes. And when the Great War came, those machines changed the world. The work made him wealthy enough to purchase land, an ancient Welsh manor. So Daniel Badcock grew up between two worlds, part aristocrat, nouveau riche, part wanderer by blood. A man raised amongst ancient books, old stories, and the whispered Romani traditions of his grandmother. And one evening, a strange message arrives. Not a telegram, but a sealed parchment bearing hieroglyphs and the wax seal of a secret society said to guard the hidden antiquities of Egypt. Inside is a warning. Dr. Eileen Byrne has been taken. Most men would go to the authorities, but Daniel Badcock has never been most men. Instead, he walks to the hangar on the estate. There, beneath canvas covers, rest experimental aeroplanes that his father once built, machines inspired by the legendary aircraft of the Red Baron. And within hours, one of them is roaring across the skies of Europe. From Wales, across the Channel, over France, toward Egypt, a lone pilot racing the sunrise. He's driven by one purpose, to find his old friend Eileen Byrne, to uncover the secret Professor Pine died trying to protect, and to discover whether the legend of the 10 breaths of Ra might actually be true. Now the series and that story is only the beginning, because the plan is to tell many adventures with these characters. Stories of archaeology, ancient mysteries, secret societies, lost temples, forgotten valleys, and the strange places where myth and history collide. Stories I'm calling The Occult Adventures of Badcock and Byrne. So there's a thought I want to leave on this book. And if the ancient priests were right, then somewhere beneath the desert tonight, something that has not yet breathed in 5,000 years may be about to breathe again. Now, before we close tonight's log, remember this. Every life has seasons of silence. Moments when the map table sits untouched and the compass seems still. But those quiet moments are not the end of the journey. They're the place where new voyages begin forming. Your horizon is still out there. Your story is still being written. And somewhere just beyond the edge of what you can see tonight, the next chapter of your adventure is already waiting. So keep exploring. Keep asking questions. Keep following the strange trails of curiosity that make life worth living. Because someday, someone might look at the path you chose and ask the most wonderful question a storyteller can hear. When can we read it? So in the captain's cabin, I'm going to read a portion of that to you. And we can comment on it and talk about it, parse it, break it down. So until the next transmission of the captain's log, keep your compass steady, keep your eyes on the horizon, and never stop chasing the stories that make life an adventure. Captain's log is standing by. Stay the course. And now, we are going to move into the captain's cabin, and I'm going to read something some of you may have heard in a more rudimentary form a while back, years ago, frankly, on the 10 breaths of Ra. That will be a little bit of our entertainment tonight, and I would love it if you start forming questions, and if you want to call in, you can call in, and then we'll take it from there. So, for now, let's start this up, the captain's cabin, and let's get it rolling. All right, folks, we're back. Welcome to the Captain's Cabin. And this is the time where it's kind of an after show thing and where we can take our time to talk, ask questions, and I'll look over at the chat room as much as I can. And for now, I am just calling up. I need to put on my glasses. I've gotten a new pair of glasses that aren't here yet, but it's glasses that are all the bifocal. I have to go like this right now to read correctly. And so, or I lift them up so I can read. And so I will now have the whole lens before my computer. And I want to open up this. Let's see if this is the right one. Looking for a right file. This might be it. And I got this one because I want to read you a little something that I think you'll enjoy. Let's see. Let's see if this is it. See, it stops at a certain place. There is something that I had written. It might only be at this point just in printed form. And I ran across it a couple of years ago down in my studio. And I went, oh, this is what's been missing. And so some of you have heard this before, but I think that you will enjoy it. At least I hope you will enjoy it another time here. And I'm calling it up now. I don't know if this is the right document. We'll find out. I'm going to open her up right now. And we'll see by some of the names that I use if we've got the right document tonight. Because when I started editing this, I changed some of the names of the characters. So we'll see if that stays, what the consistency is there. So let me say hello to those of you who are here in the chat room. And I see Michelle Canham-Free. Good to see you. Barbie D, good to see you. And who else we got? I'm scrolling backwards. Susie Q, good to see you tonight. And Field Guy is here because I see people talking to him. I know Roger Rabbit is here. Roger, good to see you. Saw you way at the beginning, but I couldn't get in to say hi before I started things. And who else we got? There's a lot of comments going on here. Barbie D, Field Guy, Michelle Canham Freedom, Roger, Barbie D, Roger, there you go. Just a handful of you in there commenting right now. So now is the time. Hawk Buckman is here. Good to see you, Hawk. So I am going to do this. Pamela Zaspel is here. How you doing, Pamela? Good to see you. She says, hey, the key with bifocals is keep your mouth closed. Yeah, ain't that right? Or your nose clean while looking through them, because you're always going, yeah, exactly. So now my glasses will be all what is in just the bifocal. In about another few days, I should have those. So here's what we're going to do. I gave you the preamble to what I've been working on and something that I'm developing in great detail now for publication. And now I'm going to read, and you'll enjoy this. This is like Daddy reading a story for bedtime. All right, you guys ready for this? Here we go. This is the 10 Breaths of Ra, the working title. It's a Badcock and Byrne adventure, an occult detective series is what this is going to launch, if it goes well. So here's how the book starts. I met a traveler from an antique land who said 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed, and on the pedestal these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings, Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. That was written by Percy Bysshe Shelley, once married to Mary Shelley, Frankenstein. Now, here's the beginning of this story as I have written it. And there might be some things that we need to... not sticking around too long, Scotty, says Hawk. I'm wiped out after firefighting yesterday and today. You all know about that? Okay, good to see you, Hawk. I'm going to read, so if you stick around, you get a bedtime story. So here we go. This is it, folks. Listen up now. There might be some things that are not changed in this. I don't know if this is the final edited piece. Goes like this. Winter in the desert climes of Egypt can almost be considered pleasant. The blistering heat of the midday sun, reflecting off rocks and sand that had the effect of creating an atmosphere that was nothing short of the inside of a cook oven. But during those milder months, the heat subsided to the comfort of an afternoon at the beach, and one might even find the need for a jumper and a scarf to ward off the brisk, cool air between the swallowing of the rebirth of Ra and the name the ancient Egyptians gave for the god of the sun. Donning her scarf, but leaving her woolly sweater draped over the canvas-back chair. Here, I'm going to lower this down so I can read this a little better. Dr. Eileen Byrne drew back the flap of the Bedouin tent given her by the local sheikh, a crafty yet gentlemanly old codger whose religion forbade him to look on an infidel female, but who had the loving heart of a cherished old uncle. The air that rushed in smelled of campfire and goats and a mixture of spicy incense and pungent shisha. The woven doorway was portal to a world so unlike Eileen's native Ireland, a threshold to level sands stretching out as far as her eyes could see. The sun, a blazing pink ball, was just peeking over the crest of the distant low mountains, illuminating the sand dust with, sorry, I lost my place because I scrolled, illuminating the sand dust with a pinkish gold haze that drew her mind to childhood stories of faraway realms of the Fae and their magical mists. Dr. Byrne, as the local workers called her, felt herself very lucky to have been asked to join this dig. Despite her years of education and study and subsequent years of field work while preparing her doctoral thesis, it was simply not done to have a young woman lead an archaeological expedition. She could only serve as an assistant. And were it not for the influence of her childhood friend, Daniel Badcock, whose settled Romani family were formidable donors to the university, she may surely have been passed over simply for being a female. Cambridge professor Grantham Pike, the prickly mission director of the site, was a staunch old world archaeologist who needed a bit of persuading by his colleagues before he officially accepted as Eileen as his field assistant. And while jubilantly grateful to the influence of her father and his friends, it rankled Eileen to the bone that she could not be appointed simply on her own merit, but she also understood the way things worked. And if she was ever to be accepted, she needed to show what she was made of. So she took it all with grace and indefatigable poise, deciding that her work here on the Giza Plateau would confirm her place amongst the archaeological gentry. Her drive was not egocentric, but rather the stuff of knowing who she was, what she was about, and striving to be the best. Truth be told, she was already all of those things, just a bit out of line with the accepted male-dominant status quo. Now, by the way, if you missed it, this story is taking place in 1922 in Egypt. This is 4 years before Howard Carter discovered King Tut's tomb. So now, moving on. Eileen was eager to launch into the day's work, and she rushed in giant, confident strides across the archaeological compound, a patchwork of white canvas tents littered with wheelbarrows, wooden tables, and all assortment of shovels, pickaxes, mukta headpans used to haul away debris by manual laborers, and sorted mounds of fakhar, the little shards of pottery found in every nook and cranny of every square foot of the desert flats around the Great Pyramid. And by the way, the Arabic word fakhar means pottery shard. We had at Gebel El Silsila, John and Maria's site, we had a young woman that came out about 13 years ago, and she was a pottery specialist. They had brought her on board to look at the pottery they were digging up. And so we called her, with the Arabic word fakhar being pottery, we started calling her Mother Fakhar. And the name stuck. So she was eager to launch into the day's work. The little shards of pottery, Great Pyramid. She hoped to avoid Professor Pike's morning calisthenics, consisting of jumping jacks, push-ups, and running in place, and the daily singing of God Save the King, while the Union Jack was hoisted on a wooden pole. And she hoped to slip out of camp and get directly on site to continue her work on yesterday's mysterious discovery. So far, so good. Pike was nowhere to be seen, but oddly, neither was anyone else. It was strangely quiet. Professor Pike was a man of great status at the university, but on site, he was in some respects completely colonial. He issued orders from his open-air desk, set on various carpets of fine Egyptian tapestry, while imbibing in tawny port from daybreak to sunset, which he, no doubt, obtained through his black market connections. He would sit in his high-back wood and leather throne, crystal goblet in one paw, while the other was always spread across some map or chart or hand-drawn facsimile of hieroglyphic or demotic inscriptions found on the tomb and shrine walls dotting the rocky hills about them. He always dressed impeccably, the very picture of the adventurer explorer of bygone days, jodhpurs, knee-high leather boots, a fine linen shirt and waistcoat, cravat at his throat, and a pith helmet atop his bald pate. His ever-present Egyptian punkawallas fanning him in the shade of a gigantic umbrella. Pike was, however, one of the most respected and celebrated archaeologists that came out of Cambridge, and he ruled his dig site with all the air and grandeur of the pharaohs of old. Now, I've got to check something here as I'm going on here. Let's see, blah, blah, blah. Somebody messaging me. Oh, I thought it was for the show. And here we go. So, the quiet around Eileen was a bit offsetting. She slowed her pace and came to a full stop in the center of the camp. The silence was nearly deafening. There were no fires being stoked, no food being prepared, no carts being hauled, no sounds of the workers singing, no chatter whatsoever. The air was still, and nothing seemed to give any indication that there was a huge archaeological community at the base of the pyramids of Giza. With all the normal activity of the dig camp, populated by several archaeologists and nearly 100 Egyptian workers, she had never noticed how quiet the desert could be. "Hello?" Eileen called out to the empty camp. "Is anyone here?" she said with a nervous chuckle rising in her throat. The response was more silence. Where had everybody gone? She strode over and stood before Professor Pike's desk, where his maps and papers were spread across the table. A goblet of the dark red port was tipped over. Its contents pooled on the parchments. She reached out and set the goblet aright and called out again, "Professor Pike?" No answer. A slight wisp of breeze brisked up, lifting the corner of one of the charts that hung over the edge of the desk. She suddenly felt afraid and turned quickly to look toward the rocky hills in the distance. Why were they all gone? Had they left for the dig before dawn and not sent anyone to wake her? She allowed a bit of anger to replace her fear, and she squared her shoulders and took off on a march in the direction of the dig site. It was degrading enough to not be accepted on the same level as her male counterparts, but to be left behind when she was in the midst of deciphering a mysterious hieroglyph on an obscure wall of an even more obscure shrine tunneled out of the rock was more than she could tolerate. Would they ignore her discovery and take on the work and credit for themselves? Was this why she was left to wake to an empty camp? All these questions flooded her mind in the passing of a heartbeat. She intended to find out what was going on and give Professor Pike a piece of her mind. Sure, it might get her a ticket on the next steamer leaving Alexandria, but she deserved more respect than this. As she cleared the last tent on the outer perimeter of the encampment, all her questions were immediately brought to a full stop. There, spread out on the sands before her, lying face down, were the Egyptian workers, all with their hands behind their heads, fingers interlaced. Circling the massive creatures stood at least 30 men, all similarly dressed in white galabes and black vests, holding various weapons, from swords and daggers to rifles and pistols. Black face scarves covered all but their eyes, and with a bright red fez and a bright red fez sat atop each one's head. The scene looked almost like a photograph, as no one moved or spoke. There, at the front of the scene, was Professor Pike, on his knees, with 2 guards holding daggers to his throat, and another standing a few feet away with a British Enfield rifle pointed at his head. Seated behind the kneeling professor, lounging in Pike's throne, which had obviously been dragged there from behind his desk, was a very large, imposing man, dressed in similar fashion to the others. He wore no covering over his face, and his eyes reflected the rising sun as they shifted to look directly at her. Eileen's mouth dropped open. She tried to speak, but could only croak out the word, "Professor?" In less time than it took her to get the word out of her mouth, the massive man who had been seated in the throne was standing up straight and tall, towering head and shoulders above the rest, his voice booming out one word that echoed across the sands and reverberated off the rocky cliffs in the distance. "Silence!" Eileen froze. "Bring her to me," the large man ordered, to no one in particular. And immediately 5 of the masked men ran toward Eileen, all shouting in Egyptian, Arabic, while brandishing their weapons, tripping over each other to see who could reach her first, wanting to impress their master. One of the 5, in very broken English, spat out while pushing down the head of one of his fellow minions, "You come now! Yalla quick now!" The rest of the group started yelling out in unison, "Yalla, yalla, yalla!" spittle flying in all directions. Had the situation not been so grave, Eileen could have laughed at the bumbling, almost comedic actions of this band of criminals, the sum total of whose intelligence quotients could not have added up to a handful of date pits. And frankly, she found herself so repulsed by their ruffian manners and sensationally overwhelmed by their corporate god-awful stench, obviously acquired through the countless months of bathing only when one tripped and fell into the rare mud puddle, that their befuddling attributes fell far short of provoking even a chuckle through her olfactory overloaded disdain. In fact, they were so repugnant in their dirty, oily, matted, dampened, near-manged personification that it had the effect of rendering Eileen completely watery-eyed and distracted from any cogent thought of how to act or respond, and this added to her fear. Oh, I needed to wet my whistle there. Having some grasp of the basic knowledge or language, she responded, "Yalla, yes, yalla, I will hurry." And as they reached her, they grabbed her by the arms, pulling her toward the large man sitting behind Professor Pike, and also knowing something of the Egyptian customs, she yanked her arms away from her captors and said rather sternly, "La shukran! No, thank you! Do not touch me!" And she broke free of their hold, drew herself tall, raised her hand beneath her nose to ward off their scent, and walked calmly forward. One of the masked men had the grave misfortune of again grabbing her by the elbow, at which she spun around and slapped him across his face, tearing loose his black veil in a wide roundhouse swing. His face was grizzled and unshaven, and his eyes grew wide, less from the slap than the indignity he felt at being struck by a female in front of his peers. He gritted his rotting teeth and raised his fist to strike her. "Do not touch her, you foul scum!" yelled out Professor Pike, who was instantly slapped across the back of his head by one of the men holding him at knife point. Pike, feeling the fire of his once hardy youth, turned and spat at the feet of the attacker, who immediately lurched forward to impose some greater harm on the professor. At the same moment, Eileen yelled out in anger, "Stop, you animal!" speaking directly to the professor's attacker, but looking straight into the eyes of his leader, standing in front of Pike's throat. "Stop!" called out the leader of the captors, less as a shout and more as a booming command. Instantly, everyone froze. Then, in a very quiet yet deep, bassy tone, he said to Eileen, while motioning with his outstretched hand, "Come to me, please. We are not barbarians, young lady." He then looked to his minions and nodded, and they all lowered their arms. Taken aback by his sudden change in tone, yet still angry and afraid by what was happening all around her, Eileen dropped her fighting posture, brushed her hands down the front of her shirt to smooth out her clothing, took a deep breath in, and exhaled slowly through her lips. Holding her head high, her nose a bit in the air, she slowly and precisely walked calmly through the scattered workers lying in the sand and stopped a few feet before Professor Pike. She looked down at him and asked softly, "Are you well, Professor?" "I am unharmed, my dear," he responded. Then to the guard who had slapped him, "Were I my younger self, your face would be filled with my repeated double-fisted buffets, you fatherless son of a spotted goat." He cut off his threatening words and simply glared at the masked man, who turned away, angered by the assault, yet remaining obedient to his master's command. Ignoring Pike's comment, the leader spoke directly to Eileen. "Do you know who I am?" "I care little who you are," Eileen retorted. By the way, she has an Irish accent, which you don't hear when you're reading the book. "I care little of who you are," Eileen retorted, finding her indignation somewhat greater than her fear. "For anyone who acts as you have acted, who you are is of little significance to the greater world." Ignoring her intended derogatory, he answered, "I am Sitesh. You may know me as the Jackal." "Ah," replied Eileen, "Sitesh, the criminal. You and your little band of befuddling fools here operate the black market in Egypt. I have nothing but diminutives to describe your lot, and Jackal, a self-appropriated title for a self-important crook." "How was your red port, Professor Pike?" the Jackal said rather dismissively. I do hope it was to your liking and pleasing to your palate. Pike, distracted by the thought of the tawny sweetness, mumbled, "Well, it was rather good. I wouldn't mind a wee nip now." And his words trailed off. "Professor!" Eileen angrily interjected. "How can you, of all people, do business with—" And she looked straight into Satesh's eye. This vermin." Satesh gripped the arms of Pike's throne in his massive hands, splintering the wood. Leaning forward in a defensive rejoinder, he spoke through grit teeth. "I have taken the head behind the mouth of many who have spoken much less than you, little fox. Your words are dung." He glared a fiery gaze into Eileen's eyes, burning through her haughty indignancy. "Speak to me no more in this tone, little fox," he hissed, slowly enunciating the words little and fox in staccato punctuation, as if holding them out as derisive singularities. "Or shall we see how well you speak without a tongue in your pretty little mouth?" He then sat back against the high-backed throne and exhaled with his eyes closed. Eileen believed him, and in a blink of an eye she became fully aware of just how much danger or deeper jeopardy she may have just placed on herself, Professor Pike, and their entire archaeological crew. "Forgive her, Jackal," Professor Pike blurted out in defense of his assistant. "She's an academic, not accustomed with your ways, nor familiar with the power you possess in these lands. She's a child. She's a female. Forgive her." And after a pause, he added, "Please?" And at that very same moment, pandemonium broke out. One of Satesh's henchmen stepped out, his dagger held high above his head, eyes wide with the madness that stripped Eileen of all wit and sense. "You speak not at the Jackal in such, female!" Then he lunged at her, screaming, "Allah Akbar!" Satesh lurched to his feet, drawing his own dagger from the sash about his waist, his minions scrambling in confusion. Professor Pike bolted upright, threw himself at the screaming knife wielder, sending him flailing to the ground. He kicked at the fallen man's head, then dove for his dagger, which had fallen in the sand. And as the mad minions screamed, Pike turned to face Satesh, only to be met with a flying dagger that plunged neatly and deeply into his chest. Satesh lowered his throwing arm, a deep scowl on his face, brows furrowing into his glowering apoplectic eyes. Professor Pike stood motionless, save for a slow, downward glance at the dagger protruding from his chest. He gasped for his breath, then dropped the dagger he held in his hand. Dropped the dagger he held in his hand, shut his eyes, and slumped to the sand. Eileen, not usually given to overt screaming on any occasion, let out a shriek of pain and terror. Not accustomed to acknowledging the divine, she cried out in Gaelic, "Dian Zain Numan," and fell to her knees beside Pike. She cradled his head in her lap as he spat out blood with his last breath. Looking at Satesh, she said almost in a whisper, "What have you done?" Satesh stood perfectly still, glaring at Eileen. He then calmly sat back down on the throne, as if this was something he had done many times before. Professor Pike was a good customer. "Now I shall lose profits." Then all strictly business to his henchmen. "Go to Pike's tent and gather up whatever cases of the red liquid remain. We can sell them in Cairo." And two of his men nodded and turned toward the camp to fulfill their master's command. Satesh leaned forward, addressing Eileen as if they were the only two creatures in the world. "I will not be trifled with, little fox, and you will give me what I need, what Pike would not." Again Eileen believed him, but felt as if reality was slipping away from her. Who is this Sitesh, and why did his presence here just shatter the world as she knew it? Why was he here? Why was she here? Just a few short minutes ago, she was watching Ra being born again, and now Professor Pike lay dead in her lap, his blood soaking into the sand beneath. In a flash of bewilderment, Eileen asked, "What do you want from me?" "Because of you," Sitesh replied, looking out to the rising sun. "Pike is dead, so you must now fulfill his purpose to me." "Because of me?" she asked, disgusted that something so heinous had just been said, yet pleading to understand the mad reasoning of this madman. "In his drunk, he agreed to my wishes. In his sober, he refused. Now there is only you." "What," she beseeched, "is this savage riddle of yours?" "The inscription!" He pointed to the hills in the distance. "You will give me its meaning." "But I don't know its meaning," Eileen replied in bewilderment. "Not yet." "You will give it to me, and you will give to me the Chamber of Wisdom." "The what?" she asked in complete confusion. Sitesh's eyes grew wide, and he leaned out even closer to Eileen. "Do not trifle with me." He then stood up abruptly and turned to face the hilly outcrop in the distance. "We go now. Bring her." A car engine ignited, coughed, and roared. Eileen was lurched off her knees and to her feet, the henchman grabbing her by the scarf, tearing it free from her neck. The awkward momentum threw her off balance, and she stumbled akimbo into the sand. Two other of Sitesh's men immediately yanked her back to her feet, pushed her forward toward the idling, sputtering car. "Yalla! Yalla!" they all screamed at her. She had no thought to reply to the contrary, and was dragged to the waiting vehicle, with only one half her footsteps actually touching the ground. Sitesh was already seated in the rear of the open-topped 1921 gray Dort. He patted his huge hand on the open space next to him, smiling broadly, as if he was some loving relation stopping by to take her on a leisurely morning drive. Eileen stepped into the automobile and sat down next to the giant man, who nodded to the red-fezzed driver. The car immediately lurched forward, turning away from the encampment. Eileen fell back against the seat, her face turned away from Sitesh. She looked back toward the receding tent city. Professor Pike lay still in the sand as Sitesh's men, like a cloud of wasps, began following in the trail of the car. The camp workers, suddenly abandoned, were slowly standing to their feet, some of them moving toward the fallen professor as they grew smaller in the growing distance. Sitesh shouted over the sound of the engine, "We are on an adventure together!" He smiled as if this was just another wonderful start to another beautiful day. The jackal tipped his head backward and laughed, but not in some maniacal, twisted, horrific cackle Eileen imagined him using, but in a giddy, childlike chortle, like some street urchin taking his first ride on a merry-go-round. She took one last glance over her shoulder, everything she had ever known up to this moment fading from view, obscured by the cloud of dust in the automobile's wake. And then I've got just a start to chapter 2, but it's not the full start that I had. I'm missing some of this document, but it starts like this, chapter 2. Now, that was Eileen Byrne. Remember, the subtitle of the book is the Badcock and Byrne Occult Adventures, or Mysteries, I think it is. And it's all about occult detectives. And Eileen and the male protagonist in the book have been friends since childhood. Now we're going to meet him. And from a bird's eye view, Linnet House held an impressive view of the River Wye, and the yawning Brorud Valley, just a stone's throw from the ancient hamlet of Finnanginnid and its centuries-old sacred well. It is said that an ancient Roman fort lay beneath the foundation of the ancient manor house, and that nearly 2,000 years of ghosts walked its halls. That, frankly, was the dark charm and appeal of the place that the place held for Badcock when he acquired it. Coming from a long line of Romani, he was the first to settle permanently, retiring his ponies and wagon and sinking his feet into the Welsh hillside. The realization of his amassed fortune, acquired with the making of aeroplanes before and during the war, as a new aristocracy, it was incumbent upon him to give his young son the best he could afford. And Daniel Badcock spent the bulk of his teen years in the lap of luxury with little to remind him of the more humble days of his grandparents as traveling gypsies across the landscape of Britain. Now, there we are, folks. That's what's written so far. There's another piece written to that where he gets a message, and his Egyptian servant, Daniel is probably about 22 or 23 years old. Eileen, not far from the same age. She's a graduate from Cambridge. He's an aristocrat's kid, all self-taught in their libraries of the manor house. And they grew up together, and they set off on this adventure together. So Hawk Buckman asked at 9:42, which was 10 minutes ago, what is this all about? This is the book I started writing, the 10 Breaths of Ra. And we're launching into much deeper now over the last weeks. So that is what the story was about. Now I'm going to give it over to you tonight. You guys can call in. Let me put a link up for you. You can take this link and call into the show if you have anything you want to say. And if you have something to say, come on in and say it. If you've got questions about the story I've started unfolding for you in both the captain's log and now here with the preliminary, what would you call it? Not preliminary, the early manuscript. And so if you want to talk about that, you can. If you want to call in, you're welcome to call in. And I have to look at one thing here to make sure I didn't miss something that was sent across my bow. 10 or 12, blah, blah, blah. And blah, 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 blah. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Yeah. I'll just say, okay, we'll talk after the radio show. There we go. I think that's sent. There it is. Yep. So, all right. Anybody got anything you wanna come in and add something to the fray here? Talk about any of this? We've got Friday night, and we haven't been here for a couple of weeks. So, hold on. All right. It's my daughter, being my daughter, and messaging me throughout the show. And so I finally responded to her. But she's just over in the other room, way over there. So what do you got on your minds, folks? Hawk, are you still here? Pamela Aspel Torreson says, that was fantastic. I can't wait. Good. That's what it was supposed to do. Whet your appetite for what's coming. And it's a book about, I want to tell you, these two characters, these friends, Daniel Badcock and Eileen Byrne, Dr. Eileen Byrne. They are going, they start doing these occult mysteries throughout a planned series. But this is the launch of that. And I'm going to show you for fun. Stick around if you're planning on going. Don't go yet. I'm going to show you the cover of this book that I designed way back, and some of you have seen this before. Let's see. There's the cover. It's just a front cover that I designed. I'm going to bring this up. And this is probably not the final, but it was a working cover for the proposal originally. So we're going to bring this in. There it is. Oh, let me take Pamela's comment down. If it'll let me. Hide. There we go. All right. That is the front cover. I'm going to take off the media asset here of the banner. There you go. And so that's the front cover of the book as it stands. What you've got in the foreground is of course, Daniel Badcock, the Romani. You've got Dr. Eileen Byrne in the archaeologist. She's the archaeologist wearing, pretty much the clothing of the day. Behind her, you see Satesh. And then there are a couple of characters, the Blemmies, which figure prominently in the story in one scene. You've got the airplane that Daniel Badcock steals from his father's warehouse to fly over to Egypt because he gets a message that she's been kidnapped by Satesh. And he takes the plane to get there fast, ends up crash landing it into the desert. But this is how the story starts. And it unleashes the whole story about the 10 breaths of Ra. It unleashes through this artifact that was found and the inscription that's interpreted this ancient Egyptian god. And I'm taking him directly out of the Egyptian deities. Got Set or Seth is his name. And almost demonic in the way he is approached. But he unleashes havoc because there's now a race, an international race, gets launched at trying to find the Chamber of Wisdom, which houses the 10th breath of Ra. And nobody knows what that is yet. And it's a mystery that I already know what it is because I've created it. But this will be the fun part of putting this book together. And Satesh had stolen this artifact. That's why he took Eileen Byrne. And he got the inscription. They got it interpreted. And he's having an auction amongst the nations of the world. Think of this seedy, dark back room, large back room like a warehouse, where he's got representatives of all the international powers gathered. If not the royalties or the leaders of the country themselves, their representatives, to bid on this artifact because of what it can do, which I'm not going to tell you about right now, but which I know what it can do. And so a huge supernatural, paranormal explosion of energy happens in this book with Eileen and Daniel. And they also meet a stowaway from the Chinese contingent that was bidding on this thing. Young boy, about 13. And he becomes kind of their sidekick in this because he helps rescue them if they'll help him hide, which they do. And so the story carries on from there to all the entanglements. I can tell you one scene where the god Set resurrects. They go to the Valley of the Monkeys, which is a real place in Luxor, because they found all these mummified monkeys there. and the Valley of the Baboons, mummified for thousands of years, and he resurrects them. And there's this scene in the book where Eileen and Daniel Badcock have to fight these vicious, resurrected baboon mummies and all the supernatural powers around it. And so it's going to be a fascinating book. It is really it's a combination of all the action adventure that you can think of from the past, from serial films to the black and white films to the Indiana Joneses, the Mummy movies, all of these things kind of rolled together into this supernatural romp that also has some amazing Egyptian history in it. So you're going to read about Egyptian history and the gods of Egypt and not even know it because it's going to be characters in the book. So that's what you're looking forward to with this coming out. And that's the cover of the book right there, as it stood before I had written anything, while this was just a concept. And so a Badcock and Burn adventure. And that's changing even in wording and the 10 breaths of Ra and all the things taking place there. We'll see where that goes. Might probably do a completely different cover. And it may be out of my hands anyway. It gets published by someone else. So I'm going to remove that. I'll come back up. So there we go. What do you got for me, guys? Got anything you want to talk about? Hey, Sean Stroik. Good to see you here. And lots of conversation going on there. And thank you again, Pamela Zaspel. We should talk, by the way. And so, Pamela, if you guys don't know it, we went to high school together. And I have not set eyes on Pamela since high school, which I graduated in 1978. And I think she was 1 year ahead of me in the class ahead of me. So we didn't know each other well, but we knew each other. And I knew her parents and the churches we went to. One of the churches where I did ministry, youth ministry. Knew all of this whole cast of people from that day and age. So that's who she is when you see her come in. That's the connection I have with her. So, and so hey again, Pamela, if you're still there. And we'll have to do coffee one of these days. That's what I keep saying. You got to call me. We got to go do coffee. Be fun to see somebody I haven't seen for 45 years. So, Barbie D says, and I was a few years ahead of you in my school. LOL. What year did you graduate, Barbie D? So, or were you one of those pernicious dropouts? Were you a hippie dropout? And so, Barbie D, you can answer that if you want. And everybody else, who all's still here? I think you're all here. Anybody who wants to talk and speak up, you want to call in, I will one more time, I will throw in that link. So you click on this link or you copy this link and paste it into your browser right there, that link. Oh, I don't even know if did I copy that? Is it still in my, yeah, there it is. Boom. That's how you call into the show. You'll pop up in my studio. I'll see you and we'll take it from there. Right. So don't forget to breathe. Barbie D says, if I'm answering you, I'm breathing. Let's see. Oh, I graduated, she said. And I shouldn't ask you that because that's like asking you your age. That's impolite for a man to ask a woman her age. Sorry about that. She said, I don't want to divulge my year. Well, if you ever saw that show, that 70s show that was so popular, it's called That 70s Show. When they graduated from high school, that was the same year I graduated from high school. So that gives you, if you watch the show, at least a context. So, all right. Anybody else? Anybody got anything else? I don't know how often we're going to do the Captain's Cabin now. We may pare it down to one show a week, Friday nights. We'll see. We'll see what we're going to do. The daily show, now that I have my kids and that kind of scheduling is going on, might not work out as well. So we'll see what happens. All right. So, folks, here's what we're going to do. We're going to wrap up. Nobody's calling in. I got nothing more to present to you tonight. And I wish we had some of the scripting from the second chapter about Daniel and he receives a letter that's wax sealed and hieroglyphs on it and demotic text. And something that tells him that Eileen's been kidnapped, his childhood friend. And, they were friends when they were college age too. So, but, and his manservant in the house, somebody his father had hired, an Egyptian man named Mohammed Shakespeare. And I can't remember what I named him. It was a name that Shakespeare came off of it naturally. And I wrote that a long time ago, and what his name was. It'll come to me if I think about it. But Daniel calls him Shaky, as he's Shakespeare. And this is based on a real guy, not his character so much as the name. The last time I was in Egypt, John and Maria had already gone down to their site at Gebel El Silsila, which was a couple hours drive through the desert, just a straight road right through the flat desert. And a couple of hours south down the Nile. And I got there, and Mohammed Shakespeare was assigned to me he was hired to drive me anywhere I wanted to go and see anything I wanted to see. I was going to stay in Luxor, John and Maria's house, for about 3 days, then head down to the site. And so he drove me all around, took me over to the landing. I crossed the river on a ferry boat over to the east bank of the Nile down there at Luxor. Went and walked through Luxor Temple, the Karnak temples, down the Avenue of Sphinxes, and saw some other things. Did some shopping while I was there, bookstores, gift shops, things like that. And so had a good time with that. Met up with another friend, El Tayyib. If you're listening, El Tayyib, he was our guide back in 2014. Whenever you took a tour group, you had to have a government-appointed guide. Even though we had John and Maria, and we had about 6 other people from the Ministry of Antiquities that were friends of John and Maria's because of their status as archaeologists, that when we brought our guests, they would meet us at places and take us into places you could not go if you were just a tourist there. And guys from the Inspectorate of Komombo, with the Ministry of Antiquities, other archaeologists, the man who was was at the time the supervisor, overseer of archaeology at Karnak temples. I think he started with Luxor temples, went to Karnak temples, and now he actually works the airport, which is, he said, even bigger than all that. And he's been on the show before. Momin Saad. He came on one night. I saw him in the chat room. He just came in to check it out. And we brought him on air. And he told some stories. If you remember that from maybe 3 years ago or 4 even. So Mohammed Saad, Momin Assad. And so we had all these people along. And so it was a great time. And I don't know what that is. Holy cow. It's 10:10. 10:10 just came up on my phone. And I heard a sound, an alert I didn't recognize. And 10:10 came up. Does anybody know numerologically what 10:10 means? Shall we do it again? Let's look it up. I'm going to go over here and say, hey, Callahan, I'm still on the radio show. Can you tell me once again for my audience what the meaning numerologically, astrologically is for the number 1010? And I just asked you that yesterday because I had that number show up yesterday. And remember, and folks, I'm talking to you on the radio as well, that 1010 is, and by the way, out east, it's 11:11 right now. But that these are time prompts that our brain picks up on. And there is sometimes meaning behind those things for why the meaning of certain numbers appears at a certain time. So Callahan, give us the numerological and the astrological meaning of 1010. Let's see what we got here. I think this is very interesting. I've had this a few times with some things I've been doing. So he says, Scotty, let's give your listeners a nice, clean explanation they can follow. Numerological meaning of 1010 in numerology, the number 10 is a powerful combination of two foundational numbers. One, the number of beginnings, initiative, leadership, and the spark of creation. It's the moment you step forward and start something new. And 0, the number of potential, the infinite, the cosmic field from which everything arises. It represents the spiritual source of the universe itself. So when you put them together, 10 becomes a number that symbolizes a new cycle beginning out of infinite potential. Now, when you see 1010, the message is essentially doubled. Numerologically, it often points to a reset point in your life, the start of a new chapter, an invitation to trust in the direction that you're heading, and a reminder that you're aligned with a larger unfolding path. And some numerologists even reduce it further. 1 plus 0 plus 1 plus 0 equals 2. And 2 represents balance, partnership, and alignment. So 1010 can also hint that things in life are beginning to line up or harmonize, even if you don't fully see how yet. So the astrological flavor of 1010, astrology doesn't traditionally assign meaning to clock times the way numerology does. But astrologically, the symbolism still resonates. The number 10 corresponds to the 10th house in astrology, the house of destiny, public life, life purpose, the path you're meant to walk in, the world. The path you're meant to walk in the world. So seeing 1010 can be interpreted symbolically as a moment when your mind becomes aware of something connected to direction, purpose, or the road ahead. It's like a little cosmic nudge saying, pay attention, you're at an inflection point. So the psychological side, which I was hinting at on here, you're also absolutely right to mention that part of this phenomenon is pattern recognition. Our brains are wired to notice patterns like 1111, 1010, 333, 1212. And once we've noticed them a few times, the brain starts to flag them automatically. But the interesting thing is that when people notice those numbers, it often happens during moments when they're thinking about something important, life decisions, creative ideas, emotional shifts. So the number becomes less about magic and more about a moment of awareness, a kind of mental bookmark. And a simple way to explain it, if you want to wrap it up for the audience, you could say something like, when you see 1010 numerologically, it represents a new cycle beginning, one step forward into the infinite possibilities that lie ahead. And astrologically, it echoes the symbolism of the 10th house, destiny, direction, and purpose. And psychologically, It may simply be your mind recognizing a moment that matters. And since you mentioned 11:11 on the East Coast right now, that one's often interpreted similarly as a moment of awareness or alignment, almost like the mind pausing for a second and saying, "Pay attention, something meaningful may be unfolding." And so there you go. There's a cool historical angle about why 11:11 became famous as a mystical time, and I don't want to get into that right now. It's a big, long thing that we'll avoid for tonight. So there you go. 1010 popped up. Now, one thing I have said when discussing and debating this with Callahan, who wants to stay strictly scientific, it's just your brain recognizing patterns. Maybe so. But I said, what about the times where those show up at specific moments that align with what you're doing, with what you're thinking, with what you're talking about? Angel codes, Michelle Cannon-Free says. I've been gifted them since way back in 2004 after my divorce. She says, every time I check the clock must be a mystic moment in time. It's spiritual, not scientific. Yeah, I agree. You might have a debate with my AI on that. So I see it as messages being delivered. All right. Anybody else got anything to say about that? Got any questions about anything? Any comments you want to make? Have I missed anybody coming in here? I don't think I have. Nope. So, guess what? We're going to end the show. And I don't know when we'll be back, sometime next week. We might do a couple of shows next week because I don't have kids around. Or we might just wait till next Friday. We'll see what happens. So I want to thank you all for being here. Thanks for giving me your time. I hope you enjoyed tonight. And boy, we'll take it from there. And you have a good night. And I'll see you next time.
Are you looking for a really awesome and amazing graphic designer? How about an illustrator or a photographer? This is Rainey Roberts, and I wanted to tell you how you can get my designer, illustrator husband, Scotty Roberts, to work for you on your project. Do you have an awesome self-published book but no cover, or even worse, a cover that really sucks? Do you need a kick-ass logo for your company or some awesome graphic designs for your ads or website? Then get in touch with my husband for the best awesome kick-ass design and illustration. He knows his stuff, and he's been at this for more years than I've been alive. Go to ScottAllenRoberts.com. That's Scott with 2 T's, ALANROBERTS.com to take a look at his online portfolio of work, or call 651-468-8115. Now go out and kick some ass with some kick-ass graphic design.
Hi, my dad. So he can take me to Disneyland.